What is going on YouTube? Running on Sports back here with another video. Today is our Bears off-season review. Today we got a lot to talk about the Chicago Bears and one of the most interesting off-seasons for the Bears. And so we're here to talk about it. And if you have not already, please leave a like down below on this video. Subscribe, share this with your friends, and please follow our social media pages at runningun_sports on Instagram and at runningunsports on TikTok. And with that being said, the NBA playoffs still going on with the Atlanta Hawks defeating the Milwaukee Bucks 116-113 in game 1 of the series on Wednesday night. And that is all we really have for the update on the NBA playoffs. So with that being said, let's get right into the video with the Chicago Bears record being 8-8, squeezed into the playoff at 8-8 with a even 500 record and being second in their division behind the Green Bay Packers. And just really interesting. All but 2 losses were to playoff teams, so very promising, and it really surprises me because you look at an 8-8 team and you look at the Bears, they really looked horrible last year, like just not good at all. And I really think that they're one of the teams out there. They looked like they just were not having fun. And obviously it's not all fun and games in the NFL. The goal is to win games, but it just looked like they weren't enjoying themselves. And maybe because they weren't doing that good, but 8-8's not terrible, and considering the fact all but 2 losses were to playoff teams, that is not a terrible stat and really is good in their favor. But they very strong start to the season, started out 5-1, and then they finished the season in their last 10 games 3-7, and that's not a good way to end the season. And if it wasn't for that hot start at the beginning of the season, the 5-1 start, they would not be in the playoffs. And I'm really surprised that they made it to the playoffs, lost to the Saints, and it's a very interesting game. They actually really didn't lose by that much, but the Saints obviously came away with the victory and then went on to lose to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the next round of the playoffs. So very interesting story there with the Bears, their record, their 2020 review, and how they made the playoffs is also very interesting. But we're going to move on to the quarterback play, which there was a lack of in the game. The Bears' leading quarterback was Mitchell Trubisky. He played 10 games, split some time with Nick Foles, obviously, and 2020 had 2,055 yards, 16 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and 61.3 QBR. And, his yardage ranks 31st in the NFL, so second to last in the NFL. His touchdowns ranked 20th in the NFL, and his interceptions ranked 8th in the NFL, and that is also him playing only 10 or only playing 10 games, so 6 games less than everyone else, and 61.3 QBR, tied 10th, or tied 21st in the league for 61.3 QBR, and that's in 10 games, and that's just shows you that he was not a very efficient player. Did not look that good, and that's what's gonna happen when you draft a guy coming out of North Carolina. He'd only played 1 full college football season, and I really thought that he was not that good, and I was really questioning what they were thinking taking him, and I didn't think he was a franchise quarterback type of guy. And I think that's what you get when you draft a guy who's only in college for a year. And yes, he was good in college for a year, but that doesn't mean much. 1 year is 1 year, and you got to be good for multiple years in the NFL if you want to last for a while. Then you have Nick Foles, who got thrown in after Mitchell Trubisky was, I guess you could say, benched. He played 8 games until being injured in a game versus the Minnesota Vikings, but his 2020 stats are terrible, and we'll read them off. 1,852 yards, ranked 32nd in the NFL, dead last. 10 touchdowns, ranked second to last, 31st. 8 interceptions, tied 10th. And yes, that's in only half the games that everyone else played, so that is not that is not good, being 10th in half the games. And 43.3 QBR, dead last, the most inefficient quarterback in the NFL. And that's horrible. Both these guys are bottom half of the league quarterbacks, but obviously the stats tell you that Mitch Trubisky is slightly better, but I don't think that me saying he's slightly better means that he should be their franchise guy by any means. Not at all. I don't think that Mitch Trubisky is that good, but I think that they really made a stupid decision in starting Nick Foles, who is statistically the worst quarterback in the NFL, and putting Nick Foles in for a guy who was performing in the bottom half of the league, but obviously performing in the bottom half of the league versus being placed for the worst quarterback in the NFL out of the starters is a stupid decision, and it's a Bears front office decision that we've always seen. The Bears have never had a franchise quarterback. Quite honestly, I don't know if they ever will, and that's just how they've always been. That's their claim to fame, really, and just really unfortunate. And so, putting those two guys' stats together, 3,907 yards, 26 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, versus Matthew Stafford, the Detroit Lions quarterback, who his team didn't even make the playoff. Matthew Stafford had 4,084 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. So Matthew Stafford had 100 yards more, the equal amount of touchdowns, and 6 less interceptions, and he played more games. And that's two guys combined. That just tells you that those players are not that good and do not deserve a shot to ever start an NFL game again. And if, obviously Mitchell Trubisky was traded, or signed, we'll talk about that. But, I just think that it's crazy that they made the playoffs with that, and considering that there are two guys who are not good combined are worse than Matthew Stafford, whose team didn't even make the playoffs. They were third in the division. So that really shocks and confuses me big time, and I really don't know what to say or think about that, and it's just proof that their defense really helped them out a lot. The defense ranked 14th in team defensive rankings, in the top half of the league, just barely though. And I didn't really feel like they were that good this year. They've had better years. Khalil Mack is slowly declining, if I'm being honest. And maybe he had an off year, but I think he'll come back. And if he's not good next year, then I think that he's out of his prime. If he does good next year, I think that maybe he has a couple more years of prime Khalil Mack, which is scary for NFL quarterbacks. But if he doesn't turn it around, I have nothing other to believe, but other than that Khalil Mack is slowly declining, and maybe he wasn't as good as we thought he was coming out of his first couple of years in the NFL, and maybe we overrated him, so to speak. And very interesting story if that is true. Moving on to free agency, the Bears gained Andy Dalton, quarterback from the Cowboys, and very interesting story. And he's projected a starter, and there's obviously some other draft picks that we have to talk about, and we'll fit that in later. But Andy Dalton from the Cowboys obviously got him for cheap. They also picked up wide receiver Marquise Goodwin, a very good pickup with Darnell Mooney and on the Bears as well. Two young wide receivers. I think that's going to be a good fit and going to help whoever is taking the snaps for the Chicago Bears. Desmond Trufant, cornerback from the Lions. Bears, other than Eddie Jackson, don't have really that good of a secondary, especially losing Kyle Fuller to the Broncos this offseason. They also picked up running back Damian Williams, a running back from the Chiefs who was a Super Bowl champion just 2 years ago. And so big pickup there to add depth, and I like that move a lot, and I think that that's pretty good. But they did lose Kyle Fuller, as I mentioned, to the Denver Broncos. Cordell Patterson, wide receiver slash kick returner to the Falcons. Not that big of a loss. He did take one to the house this year, one of the best kick returners of all time. But I don't think that that's that big of a loss. Mitch Trubisky, quarterback, going to the Bills, and very interesting story there. And part of the reason why Andy Dalton was signed. And Mitch Trubisky, as I mentioned, I don't think he's that good. And I think that that's what he is in the NFL, as a backup player, and I think he'll be a backup quarterback for a very, very long time. And so, talking about their draft class now, obviously the headliner of the draft class for the Bears, Justin Fields, quarterback from Ohio State, and I think that really I didn't think highly of Justin Fields coming out of Ohio State. I really thought that he was quite overrated, to be honest. I don't think he can make good reads, but I think that honestly he will do good in Chicago. And why is that? I think it's partially because I think that he'll have not too high of expectations, and they really got him as a steal. The Bears fans were not expecting to get Justin Fields with the 11th overall pick in the draft, and I think that that was a steal for them. And everywhere you look, I'm sure they'll give that an A+ grade on the draft grade. And I don't think he has that high of expectations. No one is expecting anyone to come in and be a franchise quarterback right away, especially if you're coming into Chicago. That's just bad omen right there. And I think that I think he'll do better than most people think, and better than I thought he would have done with the Panthers or something like that. But at the same time, their first game of the season is a Sunday night primetime game, and I really think that there's a huge debate on whether Andy Dalton should be the starting quarterback week 1. But I really think that even if Andy Dalton's not doing that good, and you know and Justin Fields is doing good, I still think Andy Dalton should start in that game. Justin Fields, I think, will just crumble under the pressure. His first NFL game, let alone, and then you add on the fact that it's a primetime game. Most people will be watching, and they'll be watching just for him. So I think you give him a week or two, and then you throw him in there in a game that may not mean as much, and it's not a primetime game where there's going to be millions of more people watching. And so I think that that's my stance on who should start week 1. Tevin Jenkins, offensive tackle from Oklahoma in the second round, a huge pickup and protection for Justin Fields. I'm a big fan of that move. And Daz Newsome, wide receiver from North Carolina, another move I really like in the 6th round of the draft. Very talented wide receiver that's going to be helpful for whoever the quarterback is, and I think that's going to be extremely helpful. So that will wrap it up for today's video. No real projection on how they will do in the 2021 season, but I really think that one way or another they're going to have a losing record, 7-9 at the best, and I'm expecting a lot lower than that. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and please subscribe and share us with your friends. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day.